Joining me now is friend of Bladtcast, the aforementioned Sam Whitfield, Savage Sam, for those watching on video, at SamW_NGC. Sam, welcome back to the Bladtcast. It's an honor to have you making your triumphant return here.
Thank you for having me, and I know it's a bit late, but Happy New Year. I think this is the first Bladtcast I've been in for 2021 as
I
well.
think so. I think you were in the chat for our last week's or the previous episode where we talked about Wonder Woman, and obviously, I always enjoy chatting with you on the show. But when you let me know that you enjoyed Wonder Woman 1984, and a friend of Bladtcast, Jason Blair, also says that my summary of Wonder Woman 1984 is also wrong. So I wanted to invite you back on and just your thoughts. What was your expectation heading into Wonder Woman 1984? What did you think of the previous one, Wonder Woman 2017, for lack of a better word? And just talk about sort of heading into Wonder Woman 1984.
Well, first off, I don't think Wonder Woman 1984 was perfect. I definitely, think it does have some flaws that I think you guys addressed very clearly in the last Bladtcast. But when I say I like it, what I mean by that is I don't necessarily think it's Batman and Robin bad, as some people are suggesting it is. I think there are worse comic book fan movies out there that we've had, including Suicide Squad. I think this ranks above the Suicide Squad movie. But also, I think my expectations of what this movie was going to be were kind of different from what other people thought it might be, because I remember seeing the initial trailer for Wonder Woman 1984, and to me, it seemed pretty clear that it was going to kind of be kind of like a cheesy, not necessarily cheesy, but kind of more like a fun 80s style adventure film, more like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Again, not saying that it's at the same level as Raiders, but I don't think it was ever meant to be nearly as serious in tone as perhaps Justice League or any of the other DC movies. So
Right. You weren't going to head into this expecting Avengers Endgame. And I mean, it definitely, they went for something that was lighter. And as I talked about previously, my wife felt like just because it's set in the 80s doesn't mean they needed to make a bad 80s action movie. And I don't think they had the word bad in their recipe when they were trying to do it. But yeah, I think that they wanted to get that spirit and just sort of the feeling of watching something that is your typical 80s movie. And just for some of us, it didn't really work out. But what were some of the things that you liked most about Wonder Woman 1984? Maybe compared to other comic book movies, maybe there was something you got from it that you usually don't.
I actually thought that the opening fight scene, which a lot of people thought was, bad. I mean, it is bad, but part of me also thought that, well, maybe that's what they were going for, kind of.
Do you mean the scene in the mall, right? Not when she's a little girl. Yeah. That's what I thought you meant. I just wanted to clarify. Yeah.
The scene at the mall. One of the complaints that I heard a lot was, well, it seemed like it was a really bad kind of cheesy 80s style, scene, and I'm kind of like, well, isn't that what they wanted? I'm not necessarily seeing how that's a bad thing. In other words, I think some of the things that people are complaining about are maybe some of the things that they were actually maybe going for in the movie. But like that mall scene. But then again, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's hard to know unless you're one of the people involved. But yeah, it's a valid point that it's by design. It's like this intentionally, and that is, I think, maybe infuriating from people who have come to expect more from their comic book movies. And really, I mean, it's starting with the Tim Burton Batman. So, the first huge DC movie in, basically in a decade, because that was in 1989. The first Richard Donner Superman was great. The third and fourth ones are pretty bad, those sequels. And this sort of felt more like those, where it's like, oh, it's kind of a really silly story. But even in those two Superman sequels, you're like, yeah, but I love Christopher Reeve as Superman and, of course, as Clark Kent. So, I mean, she's great. She's great anything I've ever seen her in, but she's great as Wonder
Yeah.
Woman. So you could put her in like, a much worse story than this and be like, yeah, but she's like, it's the example I always use is if you see the Star Wars Christmas special from 1978, it's so awful, but you watch Harrison Ford in it and you're like, oh no, he's Han Solo right now. He's like owning the terrible material, but he's still great in it.
Yeah.
So if you're great, you can really stand out in a movie that is otherwise leaving a lot to be desired.
And that's one thing that I think Gal Gadot did really well. I think that at one point maybe she kind of realized, okay, we're in a terrible, this isn't really going that great, but we're just going to lean into it. Same thing with Pedro Pascal as Max Lord. I was kind of initially disappointed with the Max Lord character because I feel like that character is, in the comics at least, is supposed to be more ruthless and just downright evil. And I mean, really, the Max Lord character that we got here really didn't even seem like that much of a villain, to be honest. He seemed more of like a kind of like a wayward soul that you feel bad for. And
Yeah, I think that he was definitely more cartoony or accurately comic booky,
yeah,
and sometimes I think you get used to the idea of having like almost like a Lex Luthor or General Zod or a Thanos, when you have like that level of adversary, we've kind of become conditioned to that, and I think that people like Pedro Pascal. I think I know him mostly from The Mandalorian. But I think you mentioned in the chat last week that you enjoyed Narcos, which he was on, right?
yeah, it's funny because Narcos is also an 80s piece.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes place partially in the 70s too, but um it, it was it was really kind of surprising because I feel like um Pedro Pascal could have played this much more serious, but again, the role of Max Lord was so hammy that I feel like he just kind of leaned into it. And if that's what you were expecting, then he did a good job as far as that goes.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was something that we talked about last week, and it's sort of the political aspect of this, which is in the film itself. They have the president who I really can't tell. I still, to this very minute while I'm talking to you, was that supposed to be Ronald Reagan? Was that supposed to be some Mr. President made up character? Because he looked enough like him where I'm like, I guess, but he didn't really act like him. He didn't sound like him. What do you think when you were watching that? Were you like, oh, this is Reagan? Or were you like, oh, there is no way that this is supposed to be Reagan?
It's funny that you asked that because I was kind of wondering the same thing. I almost thought that it was. I mean, at times it seemed like Reagan, but at a few points too, it almost seemed kind of like George Bush won me, maybe in some
Oh,
instances.
41? Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fair. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's why I think it's sort of taking elements of other presidents, real and fictitious. So, and I mean, at least they didn't have like, Rich Little doing like an impression of Reagan, because that's always distracting. Like he did that. He played Johnny Carson in the Late Shift movie for HBO, and it's just
yeah.
like see Rich Little in a movie is very distracting, you know. So, yeah, I was just sort of wondering about that. And then I guess the other part of that is, and we touched on this last week, is there's this idea that there's this issue of like non-consent for the guy who is not Chris Pine's character, but Steve Trevor's in his body. And I said this last week. I'm like, if you told that guy, that girl you just talked to, yeah, you banged her last week. I'm like, I did? Oh my God, that's awesome. I don't know. I mean, it's like it's an 80s movie. And I'm like, how is that an issue? Like, why are people even having that conversation? You
There
know?
Yeah, there are a few things. I think the biggest thing that bothered me about this movie was the whole thing with Chris Pine slash Steve Rogers not necessarily coming back, but I hated the way
Steve
that they
Trevor. Steve Rogers is
yeah.
Captain America. Steve
Oh
Trevor.
yeah,
Yeah,
Steve Trevor. Yeah. Yeah, I got my universes mixed up there.
yeah. It's hard
Um
to keep track.
yeah. But so my biggest issue with the whole Steve Trevor thing was how they brought Steve Trevor back, because I know that in DC they have like the infinite Earth theory, which is like, we're not the only um, Earth that's out there. There are parallel universes. I know there's one where like Thomas Wayne is Batman instead of Bruce Wayne. And I feel
Right.
like,
Yeah.
that's like deep DC lore stuff. I feel like maybe they could have done that to bring like maybe an alternate uh, Steve Trevor, and instead of having uh, his spirit or whatever possess, a guy.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, it's definitely, and look, it's again, it's a comic book movie. You can only take it so seriously, but it still just seemed like a bit of a logic flaw in like how he's there and why he's there. But look, I like Chris Pine. I think that there was definitely some fun to him being there. But on the whole, I was largely disappointed in the movie. To the
yeah,
extent where I haven't been able to bring myself to rewatch it, even though I could watch it for free for a few more days on HBO Max. I still can't bring myself to sit through it again. Did you see it on HBO Max, or did you go to a theater to see it, Sam?
so I watched it on HBO Max.
Okay.
I watched it both times. The first
Yeah.
time was on Christmas when it premiered,
Yeah.
because nothing else was really on, and I will say that I liked it better the first time, but then kind of rewatching it, that was when I started to kind of pick out more of the
Yeah.
flaws in
You can
the film.
start to see the seams for like where it's maybe falling apart and whatnot. But
Yeah,
look, I'm glad you were able to enjoy it. I would have loved to have enjoyed it more. I talked about a couple of times how my wife and I went to see it at the drive-in. We had a nice night out. The popcorn was amazing, so it was an experience. It was fun. But ultimately disappointing. Look at a year where there were not that many new movies to see. This was a bit of a disappointment. I think that we should get some fun stuff this year. We'll see how movies are released and where they're released. There will be the new Suicide Squad movie from James Gunn. So
yeah.
Marvel has Black Widow and Eternals, and I don't even remember what else they have off the top of my head. So
Well, and
hopefully we can get back to getting a lot of movies out. However, whether they're in theaters or what HBO Max is doing, where they're in theaters and you can watch them streaming. And I'm sorry, what were you going to say, Sam?
yeah, well, and that's one thing I wanted to kind of bring up too, is I think maybe I think had there been other movies that had come out this year, or in 2020 rather, I don't think I would have enjoyed this one quite as much. But I
Yeah,
think this was on my list of like, oh well, okay, well I enjoyed it, but that's really because there wasn't anything that really came out this year other than perhaps like, Tenet and then The Mandalorian as far as shows
yeah.
went. So
Yeah, no. It's been a great year for streaming, but obviously not for the box office. I mean, 2020 had a few movies come out in the first 3 months, and then it really slowed down a lot after that. Um,
yeah.
well, Sam, I'm glad you were able to enjoy it, and I wanted to take just a few minutes here because I know on your podcast, the Whitfield Report, you talk about entertainment, you talk about pop culture, but it's predominantly a political show. So since I'm talking to you on Inauguration Day, I just wanted to take a couple minutes for some of your thoughts on look, the guy you didn't vote for being sworn in today. I just almost said the term sweared in, but I caught myself sworn in today. And even if it's the guy you didn't vote for, if there's anything you're able to be hopeful for as we look forward.
Yeah, I'm hoping that look, I know a lot of people are kind of in, dire straits. They think that the country is, they're either really happy or they think that the country is, on its last legs. And look, I don't think we're nearly, in as much trouble as people think they are. I'm hoping that Biden proves a lot of people wrong and actually is a decent president. I am hopeful for that. I definitely think that I'm more interested to see where the Republican Party goes post Trump. Kind of how they recover from Trump's admittedly questionable legacy, especially within
Yeah,
the
I mean,
last.
there wasn't there was a legacy that you would have had a lot of people that would try to discredit before the election, and then just what he did in the few months after that, just really sidelined, any of the things that were accomplished. It's like, well, yeah, but now history is sort of framed by what happened after the election, and I mean, just sort of and look, there are still plenty of people. There's people that you and I are mutually Facebook friends with who are still convinced that that he was right, that the election was stolen, and and I don't even know how much, what stock you put into that, but there's still plenty of people who feel that. And, if at some point he had said, like, oh, I can't believe I lost to this guy, but I did lose to this guy, even if he'd said that this morning, on inauguration day, if he'd been like, yeah, I did lose, can't believe it, but don't worry, I'll be back. But so never actually coming to terms with it, I think just helps perpetuate it,
I
and I think that that's unfortunately that's really what his legacy is. Go ahead, Sam.
I think the other thing too that just gets me is this whole thing with QAnon that popped up, because I mean QAnon has been around for a couple of years, but it's never really up until recently been in the collective. And look, I always like to say that, well, I remember when Q meant two things: the gadget guy on James Bond, and then the deity in Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Right. Yeah. Those are
Those
my cues. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Those are the two cues that I supposedly trust. And I don't know. I get people who believe in Q who email me stuff. So I've read some of what they believe, and it's I mean, it's great science fiction, but that's about the height of it.
Yeah.
There's really
Yeah.
nothing substantial to it at
Yeah,
all.
and I mean, you had that crowd even up until today where they were waiting. They're like, "Wait a minute, what? Where's General Flynn? Aren't they supposed to storm up the steps and arrest all these people? And it's an interesting thing to look at on Twitter. There's all these screen grabs of Q related chats and just some of the things that people are like, I can't believe that this didn't happen, and like they were there until the end, really firmly believing that, that it's what a cabal of vampire pedophiles and, I mean, all that sort of stuff, and it's just like, yeah, but it's easy for them to believe that, but not the idea that, look, President Trump got a lot of people to vote for him, but he was, and he's very popular in certain circles. But there were a lot of people, Republicans included, who were just like, I don't think that this is good for America. So as popular as he was, you had a lot of people who were like, that's not what I can vote for. And it was an interesting point somebody else made, was that, you know, you had Trump got voted in because he was not Hillary. And our friend Dennis
Yeah,
Miller would say that he was voting for not Hillary. So whoever was on the ballot in 2016, he was going to vote for whatever the vote was that meant not Hillary. And I think Joe Biden was the not Trump candidate. I think that, a lot of Democrats were like, this isn't the guy we thought. We really wanted Bernie, or we wanted Mayor Pete, or we wanted somebody else. But, this is the not Trump vote. So,
yeah,
then the question will be, in 4 years, is there well, I guess it's three and change, the not Biden vote, or if people wonder about his health, the not Kamala Harris vote. And I don't know. I mean, that's to your question, is like where it all goes. It's hard to say. You have former President Trump saying he wanted to start a Patriot Party, you know? And I think that the damage that would do to the Republican Party is not insignificant.
I mean, I certainly think that, first off, I think that you know, even if Trump doesn't get, I mean, he's already been impeached, but even if he doesn't get prosecuted or whatnot, I've heard rumors that he's going to run again in 2024. But I mean, the guy is 78 years old. I don't think that's going to happen, even if if he had just lost. I will tell you that I think if there's any Trump that's going to run again, I think it's Don Jr. And I think he's much more eloquent than his father is. But then again,
Yeah,
who
I think you have
knows?
a Ivanka likely to run for Senate or something like that, but I don't think she would run for president. But I could see Don Jr. Running. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it's always interesting to see what it is, and I don't know. You're finding a lot of people who, you had the same thing when Obama was elected, and look, it was hard to find, but there were people 4 years ago today when Trump was sworn in that were just like, look, you have to hope for the best because you can't root against America. You want the country to do well. You want like these guys to prove you wrong, that,
Yeah.
maybe things will go all right. And look, I think if he's able to take charge and a lot of people start getting the vaccine by the summer, if people can like go to the beach again, and not worry as much, I think that goes a long way, and I guess we'll have to see. And people can, of course, head over to the Whitfield Report to stay tuned. Are you on specific nights or how does it work?
Yeah, so I'm on Thursdays around like 4:30 p.m. and that's usually when I do my political. I mean, that's usually when I do more of like a pop culture thing. And
Okay.
then Saturdays at 10 p.m. I do like an hour of politics, and then I do again an hour of like pop culture and whatnot, which I'm going to be doing a lot more movie reviews and whatnot now that we're out of the election year
Sure. Yeah.
season. So, and now that there's more to talk. And by the way, I don't want to mess up the past, present, future hour here, but you and I seem to be one of the only people out there that like or even understand what's going on with WandaVision so
Yeah.
far.
Well, I mean, I think people like it, but they're just like, it's weird. And I think that there's a lot of questions with WandaVision, but I think it's cool. And I have the faith that they're going to tell us what it is. It's going to be explained. It's just not a movie. So we have to wait week to week. And as frustrating as it is that that's not a show that we can binge. It keeps us talking and it keeps us, trying to guess what's going on. Like, what does this Easter egg mean? What is this reference to from a comic book? And what is that? And I mean, it's fun. I mean, the show that I do on my YouTube channel, Marvel Movie Talk, we do Fridays at 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern. Right now we're spending time dissecting WandaVision. We expect to do it for the remaining 8 weeks of it, and I think it's fun to have it to talk about. It makes for event television the way The Mandalorian did. You don't get a lot of shows, not anymore, that people watch essentially in real time. And then everybody wants to talk about it that day. And everybody's worried about, like I had to sign out of Twitter before I watched the Mandalorian finale because I didn't want it to be spoiled, And,
Yeah.
and I think it's great to have stuff that happens in the immediacy like that. And I feel like all will be revealed and everybody will be happy with WandaVision. But what do you think about WandaVision as you watch it, Sam?
Well, like I said, I like WandaVision. It kind of reminds me of a throwback to not just the I Love Lucy and Dick Van Dyke Show, but there is the element of, I don't know if you've seen the show Twin Peaks at all, but Twin Peaks,
Yeah.
Obviously gets like very kind of psychedelic and trippy somewhat with, time and space and
which
whatnot.
maybe they'll turn into that skid when they get to like 80s and 90s episodes. I mean, there's some, glimpses of things we've seen in the trailers for, 80s and 90s styles there at their house. So yeah, I mean, while they're still in whatever this is, this simulation or a dream or whatever it is, I hope that they explore stuff like that. Yeah, but Twin Peaks is a great call. I think you can definitely find some just weirdness, and for lack of a better words. And I'm excited. I'm glad we have that. And we're gonna have the Falcon and Winter Soldier after that. We're gonna have a Loki show. So even if movie theaters aren't happening where people live, Disney Plus is going to bring it all to you. So at least we have that,
Yeah.
Sam, thank you as always for being on and standing up for Wonder Woman 1984. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. So.
And as I mentioned, at SamW_NGC.
Yeah.